Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise today and move second reading on Bill 9, an act to modernize enforcement of provincial offences. This bill makes amendments to make the enforcement of provincial laws and municipal bylaws more effective, efficient, and proportionate. The bill has two main components. First, it changes the enforcement mechanism for minor provincial and municipal offences. Second, it allows increased use of e-tickets. I'll address the first issue first. Currently, if a person is ticketed for a minor, non-motor vehicle related infraction, like failing to pay a transit fare or failing to shovel snow, and does not attend court or pay the ticket in time, the court will issue a warrant for that person's arrest. If the person comes to the attention of police again and they cannot pay at that time, they'll be sent to jail. This method of enforcement is disproportionate, resource-intensive, and ineffective. Mr. Speaker, in 2011, Barry Stewart died in the old Edmonton Remand Centre in a tragic incident that could have been prevented. A comprehensive fatality inquiry report was completed to look into this incident. The review indicated that Barry Stewart had been placed in the remand centre to serve a 5-day sentence arising from his failure to pay fines for being intoxicated in a public place, trespassing, failure to appear, and jaywalking. With this legislation in place, individuals with overdue fines for minor infractions will not face jail time. Mr. Speaker, Barry Stewart's tragic death, I think, is a poignant reminder of how important it is to keep people who don't belong in jail, who don't present a danger to the public, out of jail. Currently, people are being sent to jail not because they've committed an offense where jail is the appropriate penalty, but because they can't afford to pay fines. Mr. Speaker, this amounts to criminalizing poverty, and it does not serve anyone in Alberta. Jail is an incredibly expensive method of dealing with individuals, and it should be reserved for instances in which the person presents an actual danger to the public. It should not be used to criminalize those who have been unfortunate enough to find themselves struggling with mental health or addiction and find themselves living on the streets with insufficient money to pay tickets, some of which tickets are often issued for violations like loitering, which essentially amounts to, standing around where you're not meant to be. But if you have no private space to go to, Mr. Speaker, if you are homeless, sometimes you will find yourself out on the street. So it's, I think, deeply unfair to ticket these people for being homeless and then ultimately send them to jail. Of course, there should be consequences when someone violates a municipal bylaw or provincial offense, and there will continue to be. With these amendments, if a fine is not paid voluntarily, it will be enforced through civil enforcement mechanisms. The main enforcement mechanism will be a restriction on motor vehicle registry services. So this is very similar to what we do now with traffic tickets and with parking tickets. If a person doesn't pay and they don't respond by the date in question, then they will be able, when they go to register their vehicle, they'll be unable to register their vehicle and they'll be asked to pay. For those people who don't own vehicles or who refuse to pay their fines, other enforcement mechanisms will be available. These include filing writs against real estate or personal property and garnishing wages. You can also garnish bank accounts or income tax refunds and GST rebates. In the case of the latter two, this will be done through the Canada Revenue Set-Off Program. With these amendments, Mr. Speaker, our government and social agencies will be in a better position to work with individuals who are coping with poverty so that these individuals don't become trapped in an endless cycle of poverty and incarceration. Bill 9 will help reduce the criminalization of poverty. In addition, using warrants to enforce fines for minor infractions is ineffective. The number of outstanding warrants in Alberta continues to grow each year, with warrants for minor infractions being a major contributor. Currently, we have close to 187,000 outstanding warrants in Alberta, and half of those warrants are for relatively minor provincial and municipal infractions. Issuing and enforcing these warrants is resource intensive for the police. In addition, it's estimated that court staff alone spend more than 9,000 hours annually processing warrants for minor infractions. Law enforcement agencies also spend many hours each year entering these warrants into their system, transporting and processing the individuals they arrest. The cost of using these police resources, and they really are resources, police officers are highly trained people. These are resources that are best targeted for what they're intended to do, which is to deal with sort of criminal matters. And using these police resources on minor infractions instead of more serious infractions is deeply concerning. So this proposed legislation will help address this issue, and it will allow police officers who are highly trained individuals to focus on what's most important for them. These amendments will make this enforcement more efficient, more effective, and more fair for the individuals who come into contact with the system. Mr. Speaker, the other set of amendments in this legislation will enable the expansion of what we call e-tickets in Alberta. E-tickets are violation tickets that are filed and processed electronically rather than in paper form. These are already used for photo radar offences, which account for about 60% of all tickets in the province. The proposed amendments will enable the use of e-tickets for offences where the ticket is issued directly to an individual, a process which other provinces, including Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Nova Scotia, have already implemented. Currently, when an officer issues a ticket at the roadside, the ticket is handwritten on a pre-printed form. After the ticket is issued, the officer must bring the court and police copies back to be entered into the law enforcement data system. The court copy must then be physically transported to the court, where clerks file and enter it into the court information system. Currently, if a summons ticket is issued, an officer is required to take the ticket before commissioners for oaths and swear that they have reasonable grounds to believe that the person they issued the ticket committed the offense. Under the new system, they will be deemed to have sworn. The standard required for charging will remain the same, but the administrative step of swearing the ticket will be removed. These amendments will enable the officer to enter the necessary information about the offender and the offense into a laptop, print a paper copy of the summons ticket in their cruiser, and give that to the alleged offender. The electronic ticket in the laptop will be sent automatically to law enforcement system and to the court information system, so paper copies will not need to be transported and clerks will not need to use their time doing data entry. By eliminating the need to file paper tickets with the court, processing times will be quicker, administration costs will be lower, and the opportunity for simple data entry errors will be reduced. I would like to highlight that using e-tickets does not change the standard for charging someone with an offence, nor does it create new opportunities to issue tickets. The standard for charging will remain the same, and the offences for which one is charged will remain the same. All that will change is that the information will be entered once and transmitted electronically instead of having to be entered on separate occasions. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, these amendments have been discussed for the past decade, and many people have been waiting on the government to make these changes. I'm proud that not even a year into my role, I'm able to bring this bill forward to work towards modernizing enforcement of provincial offences. I think at this time, Mr. Speaker, when we are so short on resources, that these sorts of initiatives, which will ensure that people's time, court clerks and police, is used efficiently and effectively to ensure that we aren't, enforcing warrants for issues we don't need to be enforcing, to ensure that time is not being used for data entry, which could be used in another way, are really critical. Because at this time the government faces significant financial pressures, and I think it's in the interest of all Albertans to ensure that we are using resources most effectively. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I think it remains important to note that for a very long time, community groups have been calling for some of these amendments. They have been asking to change the system so that people don't enter the cycle of incarceration, so that a youth who may be struggling, who may have left home early for whatever reason they have, who gets on a C train and doesn't pay for the C train, doesn't find themselves in jail, being exposed to people who are far more entrenched in a criminal lifestyle that we maybe don't want them to be exposed to. You know, once someone enters the jail system, they can find themselves sort of moving into a lifestyle that will keep them rotating in and out of jail for years. Mr. Speaker, this doesn't serve anyone. It's not in the interest of the individual in question. It's not in the interest of Albertans, and it certainly isn't in the interest of ensuring that we're targeting funds effectively. So I would respectfully urge all my colleagues in this House to support this bill. Thank you very much.